But what are the final sticking points to the deal?
Well, there are several. The first seems to be on sanctions relief, because the Iranians definitely want their sanctions relief more front-loaded. They want it earlier. Their argument is if they're going to be taking these steps to curb their nuclear program, then instead of waiting until all of these steps are taken, they should get some relief at the beginning. And that means they're pushing really hard on the other side for access to more than $100 billion in frozen assets of oil funds that they have in overseas accounts. We also know that there's an issue over access to sites and to nuclear scientists to resolve past questions over Iran's suspected military work. And really interestingly, just today, Bloomberg has discovered that one remaining problem is that of the UN arms embargo. And the U.S. wants to delay the lifting of that arms embargo. Iran obviously does not. And certainly there's also the question of how long it's going to be that there's going to be a snapback mechanism to allow sanctions to automatically return if Iran were to cheat on the deal. So those are the main sticking points that remain now, Olivia.
All right, Indira, bring us up to speed with what's happened over the weekend, over the past 48 hours. We just heard from Secretary Kerry, who was actually speaking yesterday, sort of pouring a little water on hopes for a deal. The Iranian officials perhaps sounding a little bit more optimistic. What's your take? How close are we to a deal at this point?
Well, I mean, I think my take is probably pretty close to that of the Chinese foreign minister, who came out a couple hours ago and said, look, this is make it or break it point. We have to get this done, but it's now up to the U.S. and Iran to make the hardest decisions that remain to be made. So what we have is all the ministers from the P5+1 countries, that means the permanent members of the Security Council plus Germany and Iran, are in the building behind me, the Coburg Palace, negotiating as we speak. What they would like to do is get this deal done today or tomorrow. I don't know whether it is actually going to be done, because as John Kerry has said, he is willing to walk away if the U.S. does not meet its own red line. So we may see these talks drag out for a couple more days. And most interesting of all was Federica Mogherini, the EU foreign policy chief, who said that if they don't get a deal this week, that there is no plan B, that there would not necessarily be another extension, and they might be into completely new territory at that point.
Indira, one of the sort of the overarching sticking point of the whole nuclear negotiation with Iran has been this issue of this incredible dearth of trust between the two sides. Has trust developed between Secretary Kerry and his Iranian counterpart? How would you characterize the relationship at this point? Over the past 6 months of these two teams coming together for the first time in decades to try to hammer out this deal?
You know, it's a really good question, Olivia, and it's now been essentially 22 months that the U.S. and Iran have been meeting regularly, so you can bet that John Kerry and Mohammad Javad Zarif have a pretty close relationship at this point. That doesn't mean they're buddies, but it means they know how the other one works. I think they have professional respect for one another. And, you know, you're absolutely right that the dearth of trust is a key issue here, not just between the U.S. and Iran, or the international community in Iran, but also between Iran and the UN atomic inspectors with whom they're going to have to work. There's a team right now of 5 members of the so-called IAEA who are in Tehran today talking to authorities there about what kind of access they're going to get to nuclear sites. So as President Obama has said himself many times, this is not about trust but verify. This is about distrust and verify. I think that's the position from which the Americans are working.